Well, we can really start with two questions that we have brought up probably previously. And these are common questions for whole of mankind from the beginning of time. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the beginning of time, but certainly there are many, many historical monuments all over Ireland and everywhere in Europe from Neolithic times that seem to be sensitive to the powers and forces that regulate our lives and that are obviously vitally important to us, namely the sun. For example, if you take all the Neolithic monuments, and in Ireland there are Newgrange, 5,000 years old, and so on, and all the other kinds of monuments that we find, Hill of Tara and various other places in Ireland, not just Ireland, but Scotland as well, and other places in Europe. There is a typical knowledge of astronomy, at least solar astronomy, so that all of these monuments are lined up, these great, great stone monuments associated with probably birth, life, and death are all lined up according to various equinoxes, be it the summer one, or the winter one, or the spring, or the midsummer. They're all lined up. Not only are they lined up, but remarkably, they're lined up at remarkably large distances, 100 kilometers and on. So there's obviously some concern in the background of people's minds. What is it all about? And the most ancient records that we have would be, of course, the Vedas, who are discussing and determining these problems. Problems because the perplexity is, what is the nature of our own self? And the assumption being that if we discover the nature of ourselves, we have discovered the nature of a cosmic self also, the nature of everything. And we can call that self, therefore, an ultimate reality, but we can reduce that term also to the word God. And this word, of course, comes with a lot of baggage, but if we bring it etymologically back, we can say God comes, the English word God anyway, comes from the Germanic hud, G-U-D, which goes all the way back to hutam, Sanskrit, and that means the one worthy of making an offering or two. So in the ancient days, the sun was seen, obviously, to be a remarkable entity, a governing entity, and regarded highly. We don't know the details, but no doubt everything was orientated around the movement, as it were, of the sun. Anyway, the problem is that our minds and our senses are only designed to deal with the objects immediately in front of us, and also the events in front of us, and they are within a kind of framework. We can say a threefold framework is there: time, indicating the sequence of changes; space, without the space there are no objects; and also a causation. Now, in the six systems of philosophy, the idea of causation is different in different places. For example, in Sankhya Yoga, cause and effect is seen to be variations of one thing. For example, a wave is there in an ocean. As it rises, the cause of it will be a hollow, and the apex, as it were, of the wave will be the cause of the next hollow. So it goes on. And so there's a continuation of cause and effect. In other philosophies like Vaisheshika, Nyaya, and so on, and these are kind of seen as twins because early Vaisheshika merged into Nyaya, probably. Two different approaches, and their causation was seen to be something different. So in Vedanta, as a philosophy, causation is seen a little bit differently also, in as much as the efficient and material causes are the same. I need to explain that. efficient means that because of an entity's presence, the matter which is eternal with it continues. You can say creation, for example, will be a form of an efficient cause from a creator. But when you say, as the highest conclusion of the Vedanta says, that the material and the efficient cause are the same, then everything that we are seeing is really that same being. We just have to cultivate an eye to see it, or an ear to hear it, a sensitivity to understanding everything in front of us, to put it quite simply, is that same universal self that religion calls God. Seeing it different from that is called ignorance. But how to come to that highest conclusion, which has to be not just an intellectual conclusion, but an experiential conclusion. So that becomes the cultivation of certain systems, and the supreme truth is beyond this framework of time and space and causality. It has no perishable parts in space, it has no evolutionary process or progress in time. It's a presiding principle, and beyond the range of all our perceiving apparatus, unless we interpret it in the way I've just mentioned. And even then we haven't understood the truth. We've only understood it caught up in that framework. And so because of that difficulty, there are endless descriptions necessarily of everything that is there. Endless opinions, endless speculations, also endless fights, all kinds of warfare in the name of God and religion and so on. And of course, in that field of religion, there are preachers of different religions that unfortunately stress the differences between the various creeds instead of the common factors, which are very easy to discern. Let us take, for example, Islam. Islam holds on to the Abrahamic idea of a last judgment, and many things are around that last judgment. But there are many other systems that don't take any judgment into account. It's an entirely dualistic system. It is prominent there in Judaism and Christianity, more prominently in Christianity, and then Islam. And there are some schools of thought, in the academic world anyway, that think that Islam was really, well, it wasn't called Islam, it was the society, if you like, of believers, as it was initially, was a kind of reaction against certain Christian attempts to interpret what is this phenomenon called Jesus. I mean, it probably went on for at least 500 years before it was all sorted out into the Christian theology we know today. And all of this is to account for something that is beyond the scope of our imagination even. And instead of that, we can easily see the common elements in every religion. When we participate in interfaith activities, it is very easy to see the commonalities. And the most common factors would be the encouragement and the system which is devised for two things, for purity of mind and harmony. Purity and harmony are the two factors. These are issued as moral directives, and it tells us how to attain this purity and harmony. It's no good being an armchair critic and saying, I don't believe in all of that, until you've gone through the scientific process. In other words, the methodology, which is in agreement everywhere, not only in terms of its aim, but also in terms of its common processes. For example, if we're discussing Islam, the whole physiology of the salu is taken from Syrian Christianity. There's no doubt. So how do we attain this sense of purity and harmony that is necessary to make the revelation of the truth possible? And see, it is the revelation of truth. That is, the implication is, it is already here. It is not to come. It's not there in the future. Already here. It just has to be revealed. Examples: the sun is revealed when the cloud moves on. The fire is revealed when the smoke moves on. The obstacles are removed. When the obstacles are removed, we see what is the truth. And according to the yoga philosophy, which puts it more succinctly, then the 5 obstacles are there, but the mother of all of them would be this ignorance. So the major part of every scripture will be devoted to suggest ways and means to achieve and maintain this receptive state where revelation can be possible. We have to condition ourselves into a receptive state. That means a number of psychological attitudes have to be promoted. Let go attitude. Now, let go attitude doesn't mean you relax in your bed for the whole of the Sunday and don't care what happens on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You resign from life totally. And that means you become a fallout or a dropout. See, well, Vedanta philosophy says, well, you should drop in actually. Drop into the reality. So, the various paths are pointed out, and more or less every religion will have these various paths. They may emphasize one or the other. Because, of course, no two people are totally alike. We are all constitutionally different. And therefore, a system that will appeal to every single personality temperament will certainly be the best system, the most universal system. We are all a combination of tastes and abilities and skills and temperaments and so on. We find our own individual formula. We go to our universal tailor and say, please make a suit for me, suitable for me. There's a reason why it's called a suit. Anyway, where do we start? Well, we start from here and now. If you're taking a journey, and let's say you've gone maybe a quarter of the way or 2/3 or even 2/3 of the way, you don't stop and say, well, where to now? You don't say, I'll go back to the beginning. You'll say, I continue from where I am now, which means we have to take an assessment. Where am I now? And that's the starting point. Where am I now? So the truth is unchanging. The truth is all-penetrating. It's available for our discovery here and now in this present moment. In fact, its fullness is in our very heart, even though we are unaware of it. But when we start questioning, not just from the head, but questioning deeper on a feeling level, we can understand that we are living beings. That means there are some kind of life energy is there that keeps us going. It functions. Why? Because of this divine presence. If we can register that much continuously, that'll be a good step. What we call the earth and what we call the interspace, you see the Gayatri mantra, Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, is not really part of the mantra itself. It's not part of the meter. Gayatri refers to a meter. These are preparatory thoughts. This world, and then there's a world beyond our understanding. And then there's the interspace, the heavens, self-luminous bodies. All of these cooperate to make food for us. It's the whole universe that works to make this food. And so the divine's glory expresses itself as the digestive system of all creatures. I think I quoted St. Columbanus. If you want to understand the Creator, you have to understand the creation. A very profound statement. That's where we start. We start by appreciating what this world of sense empirical understanding is. And we can see that even when creatures are asleep, still their food gets digested. The supreme digester doesn't say, okay, you sleep, I'll also sleep because I need a holiday. I've been digesting your food all along, pumping your heart. It's exhausting because I have to do it for 8 billion people. Not only that, but every creature. And the species are countless billions and billions, even trillions. If you were to count every ant, well, beyond our mathematics probably. So every cell is renewed while we sleep. Food is assimilated. Maybe even sometimes we can think dreams are supplied. All of those kinds of things. And its total freedom is reflected in the limited freedom of choice. Now, when we say freedom of choice, we get into philosophy, we can bypass it because everybody has the experience of freedom of choice. We won't debate it. Sometimes debates bypass or want to bypass our own experience. For example, if a materialist says, matter is everything, there's nothing else except matter, then you'll say, well, okay, what are you feeling now? Is it material? You'd have to make an explanation. Yes, it comes from brains. All right, well, let's explore that a little bit more. All right, because when we see every speciation in nature, from slime to bacteria to even things that zoologists and biologists study. David Attenborough, for example, is famous for his commentaries, his keen observation of the natural world. We can see such behavior that there's no doubt it is not just random parts, mechanical parts, a mechanical universe. I don't think there's any scientist adhering to the materialist philosophy that will think of their children as lumbering robots, as Richard Dawkins describes it in his book, Selfish Genes. So there's a disparity between what we feel instinctively, which is a kind of knowledge, and a kind of intellectual manipulation that has at all costs to avoid the deeper issues. And now expressed in this modern world really as consciousness. So it's total freedom, freedom of this supreme, let us call it supreme digester among other functions, enables us also to think in different ways, a supreme thinker, and even in ways which bring in pain. Now, pain is useful because when pain becomes a point of unbearable, whatever it is, then this opens up the mind to altered ways of thinking. We have the supreme example of the Mundaka Upanishad, which tells us a wonderful story about these two birds on a tree, this parable, if you will. And this is the month of August, and soon, very, very soon, we'll be seeing these blackberries appearing on bushes. And now the significant thing about blackberries is you don't really know which one is sweet and which is sour. Of course, if you're clever, you'll ask your friend to taste first and see the look on their face. And if their face is something like a gargoyle, or somebody who swallowed a bitter thing, face all puckered, and the mouth going like this, enabling your mouth to do the same. You say, well, okay, yeah, I'll look for something different, And we're after the sweet things. We're not after the bitter things. But life is not sweet constantly. It's not designed to be sweet. It's designed to give us a nice experience of everything. Good and bad, contrast, pleasure and pain, light and shade. All of these contrasting things are useful to us. But you see, these two birds on the tree is the parable. One is shining, radiant, perfect at the top, beaming with fullness, perfection, naturally attractive as a highest ideal. This is how religion begins. There are many anthropologists who think religion begins with wondering about your ancestors. That may be so. Or it begins with a wonder about the great forces of nature. That may be so. But inherently underneath it is a high, perfect ideal. And the ideal is an ideal person. And that then becomes what we call a God. So we are progressing up the tree of life, as it were, but in order to even have an inkling of this perfect ideal shining at the top, represented by the radiant bird, the several ingredients are necessary. Bitter and sweet fruits are necessary. The need to get the one which is pleasurable, the one which is sweetest, and not always doing it. In fact, invariably alternating. And then when the most bitter one hits us, then at that point we look up for, is there something better, more beautiful, more attractive? Yes. And the understanding of this attraction is like a magnet. It draws us upward in a higher way. And another component comes in, because with every advance, we get more knowledge. But we also have ignorance. And when our ignorance in the form of forgetfulness takes place, we resort back to our habitual looking, our desires. And so we go on progressing up the tree until ultimately we arrive at the top, and then the discovery is, I was that radiant bird. The Jewish term for that supreme being is Yahweh, which means I was, I am, I will be. And when asked, what is your name? I am that I am. This is pure Vedanta. And this is held in Judaism, the foundation of all the other Abrahamic religions. So the foundation of the Supreme is an absolute, and the absolute expressing itself necessarily in different ways and forms. For example, as a burning bush or a light. So this Supreme seems to manifest itself for our guidance. We can call this divine grace. And of course, when we open up and advance, then finally we get our mental purity and revelation. As we say, Tivra samveganam asanaha, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras tells us that success in this advancement is speedy for those who are extremely energetic. What you put in, you'll get out. A bit like food, it can be hot or cold or in between, And so the encouragement is, to go for something that has a catalyst within it. And that is a combination of divine grace coming to you and your response in terms of your effort. It is blessed that people are sitting here listening to this. It is blessed that you may have a guru, a teacher, a guide. It is blessed that you have some knowledge of these guidelines that we call scripture. It is blessed that you have a human body in which to evolve to the fullness of your spirituality. So you have to exert in the right direction. That's the key. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, and why we go to the Bhagavad Gita is because in the Upanishads, we don't really find much mention of the idea of worshipping. It is not really emphasized, but the Bhagavad Gita, which is a bouquet of the ideas of the flowers of the Upanishads, tells us in the 10th chapter says, in fact, it is Krishna who is saying it. It says, Tesham satat yuktanam vachatam pratipurvakam. To those ever devout and worship me with love, I give the yoga, that is the union or the methodology or the culmination even of understanding by which they come unto me. This buddhi yoga, this discerning faculty, is necessary regardless what path you follow. There has to be a discerning between, just as the bird on the tree in the Mundaka Upanishad is discerning between good and bad fruits, sweet and non-sweet, progressing up the branch until it learns, actually, the sweet and the sour, there's something even better than this. When I look for the sweet, I won't always find it. I'll find moments of it. But when I look for that fullness, when I divert all my energy in the words of Krishna, it says, ever devout, not devout sometimes, but ever devout, worship me. What does worship consist of? It consists of this whole etymological embodiment of what is this term God, the one worthy of making an offering to. So it means taking our attention and steering it, taking our energy and steering it. If we stick now with this Abrahamic tradition, we will say, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and what is in the Bhagavad Gita termed as fixing. Fixing your mind, and fixing requires concentration, and concentration is the only directive that we have. It means taking our attention and steering it in a right way, in a way which is more truthful, in a way which is their minds fixed on me, with their life absorbed in me, enlightening each other and ever speaking of me, they remain contented and happy, is a kind of a verse that went before, see? And then, purely out of compassion for them, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy the darkness born of ignorance by the luminous lamp of knowledge. Now this is told to Arjuna, and then Arjuna has this in mind because all along we've been talking about Atman that is never born, doesn't die, and so on. The divine self, and it has no form. It is indestructible. It is immortal. Water cannot wet it. Fire cannot burn it. And so naturally, the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is asking us a question. He asks like this. Basically, there are verses which are trying to establish this supreme principle, which in Vedanta we call Brahman. Is it with attributes or without attributes? We kind of know it's both because of this 10th chapter, but which is the best? I'm a little confused. Two things are being described. And so he's asking, Arjuna Uvacha, those devotees who ever steadfast worship you in the way described previously in the 10th chapter, and those others who worship the imperishable, the unmanifest, which of they are best versed in the practice of this yoga? In other words, he's asking, is it the personal God that we should follow? Is it the best? Or is it the impersonal? So, who are the greatest knowers of yoga is being asked. See? Is it those who worship the personal God, or those who are intent on the unthinkable, the imperishable? In other words, should our attention be steered toward God with form, or that which is formless, is another way of putting it. And of course the Lord says, nicely, diplomatically, actually both. But let us examine these particular phrases. So those who worship the imperishable. Now you would think that every form is perishable. So even if we worship a God with a form, we're worshiping something that is perishable. That doesn't make any philosophical sense, does it? What about the unmanifest? We're taking for granted this idea that that Supreme is both an efficient and material cause. In other words, for the material to be there from a material cause, there has to be some kind of manifestation going on. Now, we have to distinguish some terms, creator, creation, or we can say the original source, the unmanifest, and the manifest. So two things are being described. Brahman, a supreme principle that is unmanifest, and Brahman that is saguna, that has various attributes and qualities. So which one should we pick? Of course, if we think about it, we don't have to pick either because one is unmanifest, one is manifest. But anyway, which one of these aspects should we focus our attention on? That focus is called yoga. And the Lord says, he replies, Maya aveshya mano yemam nitya yukta upasate. Those who worship me, in what way? Fixing their minds, their whole attention on me, and ever steadfast, not moving. What is the definition of concentration? Concentration is taking your attention and not allowing it to shift. One-pointedness, ekagra, in the face of the fact that our minds tend to wander. Endowed with supreme faith. What does it mean? Supreme faith is equivalent to the absence of all doubt. Now, we don't mean blind faith. We mean that we have an unwavering conviction that that life force which is digesting our food, which is steering us, which is supplying us also with grace. This idea has to come in, this idea of grace. A free gift of life, not just for us, but everything, sustaining all three worlds. If we have an unwavering conviction about that, with a certain level of discernment, that in fact is the only thing that will give us bliss, just as the two birds on the tree. The only thing that gives us radiant bliss is that fullness of perfection at the top of this samsara tree. With that in mind, and with the daily experience of that, with a sense of wonder and adoration and thankfulness, as much as possible in any given moment, with everything we see, with everything we experience, taking ourselves away from the assumption, I'm a victim. Poor me. Nobody loves me. Nobody regards me. Everyone is against me. The world in general is against me. Not only that, but the world is a bad place. What happens? I open a newspaper or open the media equivalent of news, and what will I see? Well, no news is good news. The media doesn't sell with good news. You don't find headline news. The sun shone today wonderfully. You'll say there was a heat wave in Greece. A bit like people used to erratic weather, Raining, oh, it's a terrible day. Sunny, oh, it's too hot. No satisfaction in it. A trend toward negative thinking. So, endowed with, that is, where do we get the supreme faith? Endowed, it's a gift. If we have some prayer, we must pray, Lord, give me the grace of faith. Let me never doubt. Let me not doubt that you are eternally present here with me, here and now. Let me not doubt that the future will be good because of that. Let me not doubt that you will, take away my breath tomorrow or something like that. But anyway, these I regard as the best of practitioners. Why the best? Well, because the other way is a difficult way. Those who worship the imperishable, the indefinable, can't even think of it, the unmanifest, omnipresent, the inconceivable, the unchanging, the immovable, and the eternal, they also come to me, but there are conditions. What are those conditions? Having subdued all the senses, condition number one. You can see there are some sub-conditions to that. Let us take, for example, Ramana Maharshi. What was his conditions? Go into a cave. Subdue your senses completely. Two primary senses are there. Two primary biological directives are there. And they're there in the mind. So, even-minded, under all conditions, even if a storm comes and hits us, we are still even-minded. And devoted to the good of all beings. Don't think that you'll sit in the cave and get your enlightenment and so on. No, you have to be dedicated to all beings, since you are dedicated to the omnipresent, everywhere present. In other words, the positive side of it, having thought that this is a negation, not this, not this, not this, you come to a conclusion, oh, it is everything, actually. So devoted to good of all beings, truly also come to me. And so you'll easily see the next statement that those whose minds are set on the unmanifested, their difficulty is greater. They'll find it harder. For the goal of the unmanifest is very hard for the embodied to reach. Now, our Vedanta Center, our Vedanta philosophy comes to a conclusion. We are not embodied. We feel we are embodied. We think we are embodied. We think that to the extent that our identity is an embodied one. So how do we get out of this? So if you feel you are embodied, if that is your conviction, and you can't shake it off, well then this other path is there for you. So with a person with strong body consciousness, they'll find it hard to contemplate what is imperishable because they are feeling that they are part, as it were, of a perishable aggregate of parts. And so the discipline in that path involves control of the senses. It controls, the remaining even-minded, ever intent on the welfare of all beings. So all of that is there. And we find this is there. The path is easier for those who offer their activities to the Lord. And to mediate or meditate even on that Lord as a supreme goal. That comes with an element of sweetness, an added bonus. The devotee seated in the room looked at Sri Ramakrishna, the part of the Gospel of Ramakrishna, as he began to chant the sweet name of the Divine Mother. And after the chanting, he began to pray. Now you'll recall that Jesus was asked, how can we pray? And he begins with the simple, sweet prayer, Our Father, you can say Our Mother also, who art here in heaven, because the kingdom of heaven is within. Even your name is very holy, therefore we should chant it. I'm adding something. So after the chanting, he began to pray. how does he pray? And what was the need of prayer to a soul in constant communion with God, says the author of this, says the recorder of this, Mahendranath Gupta. Did he not rather want to teach erring mortals how to pray? So addressing the Divine Mother, he says this, O Mother, I throw myself at your mercy. I take shelter at your hallowed feet. I do not want bodily comforts. I do not crave name. I do not crave fame. I do not seek the eight occult powers. Be gracious and grant that I may have pure love for thee. A love unsmitten by desire, untainted by any selfish ends. A love craved by the devotee for the sake of love alone. And grant me the favor, O Mother, that I may not be deluded by thy world-bewitching Maya, that I may never be attached to the world, to the woman in gold, conjured up by thy inscrutable Maya. O Mother, there is no one but thee whom I may call my own. Mother, I do not know how to worship. I am without austerity. I have neither devotion nor knowledge. Be gracious, Mother, and out of thy infinite mercy grant me love for your lotus feet. What a wonderful prayer. And the commentary goes on. Every word of this prayer, uttered from the depths of his soul, stirred the minds of the devotees. The melody of his voice and the childlike simplicity of his faith touched their hearts. Now, if we examine the prayer that Jesus says, in answer, teach us how to pray, we'll find a kind of condensed version, not quite as poetic as this, but all components are there. Lead us not into temptation is another way of saying, please don't deceive us with your Maya, but deliver us from this deception, see, and sustain us with your grace, and forgive us all our, what are we lacking? Krishna is saying, I lack devotion, I lack knowledge. So give us this grace, please. And so on, you see. So that is the sweetness of the devotion which is added here. And the Lord himself grants such a worshipper what he needs, by the way, because this tells us, if you follow this, you'll get the rewards of the other thing, which is discernment, supreme discernment. And if you follow the other way, you'll get this supreme love. That compels you then to serve all beings. So the Lord lifts him above the ocean whose waves are birth and death. That's the end of it. If the devotee finds it difficult to direct his mind and intellect wholly to God, then there are other ways. Because the supreme thing is fix your mind on God. Now let us take this again, this parable of the two birds. We should expect from time to time forgetfulness. And what is the remedy? Remembrance. So every time we notice, oh, our mind has deviated, we bring it back. This bringing back is called Abhyasa Yoga. Constant practice, bring it back, bring it back. We recognize as a high ideal. If this bird had only fixed their mind on the radiant one at the top, it wouldn't have worried about anything else. It would have simply gone progressively up, or even directly. But human nature is human nature, or you might say bird nature is bird nature. And so forgetfulness says, yes, I acknowledge you there. That's all good and wonderful. But these fruits, and we go back to that because of our habitual unconscious tendencies accumulated, not just here, but according to our system over many, many experiences called births. when we look at the behavior of all these biological species, which is incredibly intelligent, we have to wonder, where does it come from? And it comes only, surely, from learning. Let us take, for example, in Africa, the most dangerous animals, buffaloes, hippos, crocodiles even, and even giraffes and so on, they have a companion, and it is called an oxpecker. It's a kind of bird that has a diet of insects, or not just insects, but mites and ticks and things like that, and has the effect of, the synchronistic effect of delousing the animal's skins, taking all that nuisance away, and also feeding themselves. Where does this knowledge come from? Or from both species, from the, let's say, the ox and the oxpecker bird. And if you wonderfully study the behavioral aspect of zoology and so on, as this man David Attenborough obviously does, then you will immediately never question the idea that there is something intelligent going on. Now we just take away the whole design part of it, because intelligent design as a movement has its problems. When you take the design part away, you're left with intelligence. It is because of this one entity that is wonderfully coming through as intelligence, as behavior intelligence. So no withdrawal is possible without supplying something positive and attractive. No renunciation is necessary. And if a person finds things difficult, there's always another thing, culminating on offering the fruits of one's activities to the divine. This is all contained in the 12th chapter, the Bhagavad Gita, dedicated to the subject of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of supreme devotion. It's a wonderful thing that in the Bhagavad Gita you have all these components, all these yogas present. Karma Yoga is there, Bhakti Yoga is there, Jnana Yoga is there. In one chapter, well, 5th chapter, it starts and overflows into the 6th chapter. Then you have devotion wonderfully expressed. And then you have Jnana Yoga expressed. If you look at it carefully, you see all of this is covered. And in later understandings, later texts, we see Ramakrishna coming through with his teaching, and you see it defined very definitely by Swami Vivekananda in his 4 yogas, separate lectures, if you will, all compiled in that way. One or more or all of these, he says, and be free. The implication is all of them, and that as is evidence from his design of the motif of the Ramakrishna movement. Well, we'll leave it at that. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.